Hello, welcome to Mad Dodge Productions. It is Sunday. We're going to be talking about World War One again. We missed a couple weeks, but we are back. I hope everybody has a wonderful Christmas on. It's Wednesday, isn't it? Yeah, Wednesday. That's right. Wednesday's Christmas. Hope you guys have fun. Much more fun than these boys were having in 1916, I'm sure. MC, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Okay, if I can get my mouse to work and stop trying to run over the top of my cell phone. All right, Battle of Argus in Romania begins. The Romanian government is removed from Bucharest to Iasi. The Greek government refuses Entente demands, or Entente. How you say it?
Entente.
Okay, I'm going to let Farty say, when I get to that word, I'll let Farty say it from now on. Allied forces withdraw from Athens and the Piraxis after the conflicts with the Greeks. The German commerce raider Wolf leaves Germany. And the last meeting of the war cabinet of the British cabinet takes place. All right, now, so let's talk about the Argus. What's happened is Romania has decided that they were going to try and take advantage of the situation, and they joined, for all intents and purposes, they joined the Allies. All right, and their idea is they're going to go on the attack and attack Bulgaria. Okay, now because their assumption is that the Bulgarians and the Austro-Hungarians are too wrapped up and too involved in fighting with the Russians and also fighting with what's left of the Serbs and the Allies, that they won't be able to stop them. And against the Austro-Hungarians, they've made some decent progress. Against the Bulgarians just pivot around and kick the holy crap out of them. The Romanians were expecting the Russians to be able to supply them, and the Russians, of course, can't supply themselves, let alone anybody else. It was their joining the war effort was an absolute disaster. Just a complete nonsense. In Greece is going to have a civil war, okay? Because half of the country wants to, you got a third of the country wants to fight with the Germans, a third of the country wants to fight with the Allies, and a third of the country just wants to stay neutral.
So you got a third of the country that wants pink dresses, the other third wants blue dresses, the other third want to stay with the white ones.
All right, but they're stuck with the fact that they're in a no-win situation. They're going to get involved in the people who are trying to stay neutral. Their idea of neutrality is stupid because where they're situated, they can't stay neutral. Okay, it's just one of those things of saying, okay, like Switzerland. Switzerland can stay neutral. Why? Because it's ringed by mountains and nobody wants to go through it. Belgium can't stay neutral. Okay, Belgium tried twice and failed. Well, that's the situation you're dealing with the Austro-Hungary. In World War I, that's where the Greeks found themselves, in the middle of the war, and both sides need to be able to utilize the Greeks and Greek ports. All right, so therefore they're going to fight in Greek territory, whether the Greeks want to or not. Now, the Allied forces initially landed, all right, next to Athens. The Piraxis area is like the little peninsula that leads straight to Athens. There is some skirmishing that goes on, but it's not much. Now, the SMS Wolf, it is a hell of a ship. When they send it out, it just becomes it starts to sail. They're showing it starting to sail. It takes a number of prizes. It is well named. It takes out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 British ships in the first 2 months. All right, it takes out 3 U.S. ships. All right, in the following months. All right, it lays mines which sink all sorts of British ships all over the place. So it's basically a terror.
It's not bad for an auxiliary cruiser too.
And what's more is it does the sail around the Cape of Good Hope thing. So I mean, it's you got to give it credit. That's one of the reasons why it's noted, is because as a commerce raider is one of the most successful commerce raiders ever.
So, was she sinking commerce vessels or was she sinking warships?
Commerce vessels. She's not going after warships. She had no chance against the warship. She captured, sank 14 total ships. All right, and also laid mines that sank another 13.
Okay, so the thing with commerce raiding is that the Germans are using things called Q ships, and basically what a Q ship is, it looks like a normal freighter or a fishing boat or something like that, and they'll usually sort of do something to get your attention, like, oh, distress call, or engine's out or something like that, and you go to give them assistance. When you get in, say, 100 yards of this boat, all of a sudden, a whole bunch of panels start falling down, guns pop up, they start swinging around. It's like, oh, by the way, we're a German commerce raider. Yeah, surrender your boat, or else we'll just sink you now. That's how that worked.
Basically, once it got free, it just started sailing around, just causing havoc.
And this is where convoys were brought in to try and curb this kind of thing, because the rationale was, right, these commerce raiders are running around picking off ones and twos out in the middle of nowhere. If we kept everybody in one group and then picketed them with naval vessels, well, at least the commerce raiders can't come anywhere near us.
Well, at least it's not what they used to do, right? They would roll up with the British colors raised and then drop them real quick, raise the pirate flag. I mean, at least you know when a sub surfaces, it's probably a U-boat.
Yeah, well, that stuff goes right back to like Spanish Armada type days and things like that. Piracy, the Barbary pirates, and all that. They'd use the Union Standard, and then, like, within a few yards of their intended prey, up goes the Jolly Roger. Oh, by the way, we're pirates.
Well, it's not like the British didn't do the same thing.
Well, no,
Okay.
and let's talk about the British real quick. Okay, they know the U-boats are out. They know they broke through the blockade. They know they're raiding commerce all around the Atlantic. Did the British just decide the submarine wasn't a route they wanted to go? Why did they not have their own subs to fight the U-boats with?
How does a U-boat fight another U-boat?
Yeah, there's
Sonar.
there's huge different technical differences between like now and World War One, especially World War One. All right, now you've got unguided torpedoes. The sonar technology is non-existent at this point in time.
Yes.
You're navigating underwater literally by timings and guesswork. We're supposed to be doing 5 knots, and in an hour, 5 knots was supposed to be putting us here on the map. That's dead reckoning, pretty much. Now, you can't tell where anything is under the water, for a start, so you don't even know there's another submarine out there. If you did, in fact, know that there was another submarine out there, you definitely don't know exactly what direction and what depth it is at. And if you fired a torpedo, it's going on a straight line bearing, and it's not chasing anything, so you're literally firing blindly in the dark, hoping that you might hit something, and chances are, if that U-boat's near one of your convoys, you might actually friendly fire one of your own. There was no way in hell you were fighting another sub with another sub back in those days.
Submarine against submarine actions were extraordinarily rare, even in World War II, let alone World War One. In World War One, the idea behind the subs, all right, initially for both sides, for both sides started with subs, they were thinking, okay, they are the sneaky scouts that identify where the fleet is, and then they join the fleet as part of the fleet action. No, that never happened. All right. And it never happened because the technology just wasn't there to even attempt something like that. To create subs or have subs working as part of a fleet action was counterproductive, even if you tried to utilize them. And in fact, the Germans, prior to Jutland, had set a picket line of subs. And the idea is that they would be there when the Grand Fleet sailed. Well, they missed the Grand Fleet. They didn't even see them. So the whole idea of the picket line failed at the Battle of Jutland for the Germans. What they discovered is that subs work best when they're generally working alone. Now, they could work as part of a wolf pack in an attack mentality, which they developed in World War II. But overall, they were better off working alone simply because of how difficult it was for them to find a ship. When you're dealing with ships, though, across the Atlantic, where it was just, if you miss this convoy, you just kind of like floated around and maybe you'll see the next one.
Mm. And then there's also the difference in tactics and situations and stuff as well. Like, so Britain is an island; it needs a lot of imports to keep it going. Germany is a land, well, it's on a continent, and it's got lots of other countries around it. Doesn't necessarily need to be supplied by the sea. So Germany doesn't have these convoys that what Britain does. That you could have lots of submarines to take advantage of that kind of situation. That doesn't. It's just simply not there for the British.
Well,
however, it is there for the Germans.
The other advantage, of course, with the Germans is that what the Germans need, the Allies need, but the Allies need something else, which is food. The Germans, for food production, they can raid the other countries around them. Let's be honest. They could starve the local populations of the conquered territories, and the German population is generally still going to be well fed. Okay, yep. Now that begins to fail over time, but initially they're better off from a foodstuff standpoint. Great Britain, if you can really sink a lot of tonnage, you can starve the population very quickly.
Now, having said all of that, like, yeah, the Germans have got, this is the way that we'll starve out the British. We'll cut them off via the ocean. Now, the British did have their own version of that, and this was played out more in World War II, where they were bombing German industry and all this kind of stuff. So Germany was trying to sink Britain's war-making capability. Britain was trying to bomb Germany's war-making capabilities. So just difference in circumstances and difference in tactics just depends on the difference in how you're going to hit people.
Well, the difference in capability of how you have to approach the war. But yeah, no, you're exactly right.
Mm.
All right, now the 2nd of December, I find very interesting. Right, the Russian Premier Trepov, all right, announces that the Allies have acknowledged Russia's right to Constantinople and the Straits of the Dardanelles. They're basically saying that Russia will be given, all right, the Dardanelles and Constantinople once the war is over. They are already carving up the Turks, and they can't even kick the Turks out of the war yet. Now, this is going to come back to cause some really bad blood later on. All right. Funchal is bombarded by a German submarine. All right. The Admiral Sir Henry Jackson, the first Sea Lord of Great Britain, resigns. The British and French governments conclude the Clementel agreement. All right. 1, to unite British ships in French service to those already employed, and 2, to coordinate Allied tonnage, and 3, to create an inter-Allied bureau to centralize the charter of neutral shipping. All right. And if tell me if I'm wrong, Farty, but this is basically them setting up that there's going to be convoys both for the French and for the British, and it's going to be united convoys, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
All right. 4th of December, Jellicoe is removed from being the commander of the Grand Fleet to now he's the first Sea Lord. Basically, they are moving him out. Mr. Asquith resigns. The British lose their prime minister, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Battle of Argus ends in a Bulgarian victory. Right? Bucharest capitulates to German forces, and the massacre of the I don't know how to say this.
Venezuelists.
No, it's okay. Now, this was part of, like I said, I was talking about the civil war that's taken place in Greece. Right? This is a part of this. All right. You have, and the thing about the civil war is, it's kicked off because like I said, one side wants to side with Germany, one side wants to side with the Allies, one side wants to stay neutral. But the problem is that all of them want to rule. Okay, and they have different internals to this. So the monarchy, the Greek monarch, all right, he's pro German because he's related to the family, right? But at the same time, the people who are supporting the monarchy are anti-German. So he's kind of stuck, right? And this leads to basically pogroms against your political enemies. And this is just one of the pogroms that takes place on both sides, right? Where they just basically say, okay, we're going to kick you out. And then they rounded him up, and instead of kicking him out, they shot him. Shot several of the leaders. Basically, like 27 of the leaders were taken out and shot. Mr. Lloyd George succeeds as the British Premier. This government, you'll have to say it, the Entente government.
Entente, yeah.
Entente, all right, announces a blockade from Greece because of the massacre of that took place. The Merman Railroad from Murmansk to Petrograd is declared open. The Entente powers begin the blockade. The War Cabinet is formed in Great Britain. All right. This is the new War Cabinet because you have the governmental shakeup.
This is replacing these things that we were having on a monthly basis last year, inter-allied conferences. Because this is now like, okay, right, we're now a couple of years into this. This is now going to start to drag out. Right, we'll set up something more permanent with the War Cabinet.
Okay. The Battle of Cerna and Monastir ends. This is the basically this is part of the Battle of the Somme. All right. This is basically the ending of the Battle of the Somme, the final, little devastating people dying. The Italian battleship, the Regina Margherita, is sunk on a German on an Italian minefield. So the Italians sink their own ship.
Yeah, it's bloody funny because the Regina Margherita sounds a bit like a fucking stripper's name. And next up, we got Regina Margherita.
Allied note presented to Greece demanding complete demobilization, which they basically are going to capitulate. Mr. Lloyd George coalition ministry is formed in Great Britain. Lord Derby appointed Secretary of State for War. What the hell is that, Farty?
Well, it's the war minister pretty much. Basically, he's just the minister who's just the one that signs all the paperwork. Everything's got to go through his desk pretty much. Okay.
Viscount Grey, the British Secretary for Foreign Affairs, resigns. Sir Arthur Balfour, the First Lord of the Admiralty, resigns and is appointed Secretary of Foreign Affairs. I think that was more of a... It is First Lord of the Admiralty is below Secretary of the Foreign Affairs, right? So it was a move up for him.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And the Ministry of Labor is formed in Great Britain. All right. On December 12th.
Yeah, just real quick. The Ministry of Labor. Now a lot of things happen during wartime in the United Kingdom, and ministries do pop up and all this. And the point of the Ministry of Labour is to determine what jobs are vital to the war effort, how much manpower we need to complete those types of tasks, how much can we afford to lose overseas, and what exactly it'll take to keep all of that up. So that's the Labour Ministry is the one that determines who's getting conscripted, who's going to work, and things like that.
Was there a lot of import from? Labor import from places like Canada and so forth?
I'm not entirely sure about Canada. There was quite a bit. There typically usually is quite a bit from Europe. So there's people trying to flee, and there was an attitude of England took them on. Yes, no worries, England. We'll blood, sweat, and tears our life for you guys, just so as you can try and get our homes back. So that's a bit of a tradition that does happen. I'm pretty sure mostly from like the American continent. Most of the people that did come over were mostly volunteer fighters.
Not for very much longer.
Oh yeah, well, not for very much longer, but you got the escadrille.
We'll be joined in the war, but we'll be joined in the war in just a couple months here. I know Mad Dodge has been waiting for that, but we're well on our way to joining the war. The reorganization of the French government. Minister Briand is replaced as premier. A new war cabinet of 5 ministers is formed. General Nivelle becomes commander-in-chief of the French northern and eastern groups' armies. General Joffre becomes the technical military advisor to the war cabinet. Joffre is replaced. And this is a huge thing because he's the one who's constantly been pushing these disastrous, over the top for the French. And he's gotten, the French at this point are almost ready to revolt. They're tired of going on the offensive and not really solving anything. Now it sucks to be in the Germans, but at the same time, the Germans on the Western Front for them, all right, is basically they're on the defensive. Their big fights are against the Russians in the East, where, quite frankly, it's more of a mobile war, and they're having a lot more success.
Well, here's a question, because now you're getting into the French government dissolving half of its fucking positions. We just watched the British do so. I thought they were winning this war. They're not acting like the winners right now.
Well, not really at the moment. Joffrey, he's another big culprit for a lot of the people that died, because I think you'll find that he's the French monkey that had the tactic of always attack, never retreat, always attack, always on the advance. So basically, always just getting mowed down in front of machine guns. And this attitude will change at the end of the war, where they'll okay, for the next one, we're going to go on total defense, which is that explains the Maginot Line and all this. But yeah, it was actually kind of good we got rid of this Joffrey fella. He was killing a lot of people.
When Winston Churchill comes back into the spotlight in the next couple months, huh?
Yeah.
That's what I thought, because the shakeup looks like pretty much the start of when Churchill comes back into the war.
Yeah.
And another epic mustache from World War I. You got to give them props on their mustaches. Come on, who grows a mustache like that anymore? They're epic. Did they use wax to get it perfect like that? And Jesse Miller, hey, Merry Christmas. And thank you for coming out and listening to us. We're going to get to Rasputin here shortly, so that should be interesting. And hopefully Farty will be back. It looks like he
Look
dropped out.
how big this guy is compared to the people around him. Look how fat he is.
Did he eat one of his aides?
This is now, and what's the worst part about it is that the British coordinated and gave him overall control. They gave him the highest control.
Wait, they didn't give him control of the mess hall, right?
Well, now the ideas behind a lot of this stuff. I mean, he just wasn't. He wasn't the man for the job. All right. His thinking was old, his old style. And I mean, which is why he needed to be replaced. It was a good thing. Farty's not wrong when he says it was a good thing that guy got replaced. Now they basically moved him out. All right. Out of the way. All right. And a lot of the disastrous over the top, fighting stopped, but the damage had been done. He had gotten killed so much of the manpower of the French in these ridiculous, attacks. I mean, even the Battle of Verdun, you can say that it was a victory because they took back the fort, like Fort Douaumont and some of these other things. But in reality, it did exactly what the German generals wanted. It bled the French army, bled them dry.
Well, it wasn't just the French that he bled dry too, because that fucking tactic reflected across the entirety of the Entente. So it was the British, the Australians, and New Zealanders, and anybody else that got fucking caught up in this.
Well, the Battle of the Somme, to be honest, the Battle of the Somme was there done at the behest of Joffre to try and relieve some of the pressure, some of the German pressure. And the British commander, I think it was Haig at the time, right? He didn't want to go. Mm. He was like, no, we're not prepared to do this, and basically got pressed into attacking before they were really ready and prepared to go forward. All right. It's sometimes that's the way war is, but if it wasn't for the hidebound leadership of the French army, all right, under Joffre more than anyone else, it's not a sad day to see him pulled out. Let's put it that way. All right. Sir Edward Carson succeeds Balfour. Petrovisky is appointed the Russian Minister for Foreign Affairs. IDEC notes the Austrian, Hungarian, Bulgarian, German, Turkish governments. All right, the identic notes are presented by the Austro-Hungarians, the Germans, the Bulgarians, and the Turks to the United States ambassadors and their respectives, requesting them to inform the governments that the Entente powers, that the four Allied Central Powers are ready to negotiate a peace. Okay, they're ready to stop the war.
Yeah, so basically, your Central Powers and all that kind of stuff. They're sort of saying to America, "Okay, yeah, we've had enough. Can you go tell the Poms to lay off now?"
We're ready to talk. We're ready to talk peace, and of course, the Germans are ready to talk peace. But and the Austro-Hungarians. Let's be honest, the Bulgarians have succeeded in what their war aims were. All right, the Austro-Hungarians, for the most part, have succeeded in their war aims, although they have lost a significant amount of territory to the Russians. This is something, Galicia and everything is still a sore point. All right, the Turks are losing battles in the Middle East, but they haven't lost a whole lot yet. Okay, so from their standpoint, they're ready to say, okay, let's talk peace, and we'll use the Americans to talk peace.
Well, yeah, but their form of peace is pretty much let's freeze everything right here. We're not going to give up any of the territory we've conquered. Go fuck yourselves. Oh, by the way, we would like Constantinople over there. That'd be nice.
That's what they think will happen.
Well, the Constantinople is by the Turks. The Turks are basically saying that they're going to keep it. British operations begin to capture Kut. All right, so they're basically fighting in the Middle East where Kut turned into a disaster before. They are now in a position to actually push forward. All right. The Entente powers send an ultimatum to Greece, withdraw the entire Greek armies from Thessaly. Dr. von Kober, the Austrian premier, resigns. So the Austro-Hungarian government is now starting to crack from the pressure. The Greek government accepts the Allied ultimatum. The British government recognizes the King of the Arabs. All right, this is the King Saud, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The Greek government issues a warrant for Monsieur Venosius on a charge of high treason. Basically, he set up a government in exile. The first offensive battles of Verdun end. Right. President Wilson issues the circular note suggesting negotiations for peace. And everybody ignores it.
Mm-hmm.
The British government decided to institute national service.
Okay, now the difference between national service and conscription is that conscription used to be a ballot type thing. So they'd call out everyone born on the date of June the 1st to the June the 20th, between the ages of 16 to fucking 30 something, like that's how it used to go. Now the national service was another form of conscription, but now it is when you turn 16, you're off to the army regardless.
All right, the British government decided to initiate the Imperial Conference. What was that?
That would have been probably just an orders group with the rest of the Commonwealth if it's an Imperial Conference.
The British government decides to recognize the government of Venizelos, however you say his name.
Yeah.
Basically, they're recognizing the government in exile because, like I said, there's a civil war going that's now taking place inside of Greece. Greece now becomes just kind of like a free for all, not from battles from the World War I style, but you have basically the civilians embroiled in a civil war. All right.
And another reason why the British recognise the Venizelos government is because, well, he's siding with the British. It's like, yeah, I'll side with you guys if you help me, and the British are like, well, if the Greeks won't fucking side with us, but this guy, we'll side with him just to spite them.
And this is against the monarchy. So there's a number of things that are going on. El Arish is occupied by British forces in the Sinai. The British are moving are having success in the Sinai. The Austrian premier has been replaced with Count Heinrich Klamm Martinitz.
Yeah.
I'm not sure to butcher your name, sir, so I apologize.
Yeah, Martinitz.
Ministry of Food is formed in Great Britain. Ministry of Pensions is formed in Great Britain. Ministry of Shipping formed in Great Britain.
Okay, so here's where you're starting to get into things of government and all this kind of stuff. Okay, they're starting to look like they might need to go into rationing. So the ministry, the food board, they're going to realise that a lot of people aren't going to be able to work after this, so we're going to have to look after them. So that's when you've got war service pensions and shit like that coming in. Ministry of Shipping, they're basically now going to start seconding ships from other countries and stuff like that. If you sail close enough to England, oh right, we're going to press you into service. So this is where the.
Sorry, Farty, but who the fuck? Okay, let's say an American. They're like, I want to take my yacht out. Where should I go? Oh, I hear, the British Isles are nice in wartime. What the fuck?
And unfortunately, there's stupid Americans that do shit like that.
No, well, you'll find if you just went over in your yacht, the British would be like, who the hell are you? Oh, I'm an American. Well, fuck off back there. This is a war zone, stupid. They wouldn't press your yacht into service. They'd just sort of like, wait, who are you? What are you doing?
Well, they would probably leave most of the Americans, because let's be honest, the Americans are supplying them. Overall, the Americans were not going to be subject to a lot of this stuff. All right. What they were doing is they were making it pretty well known That if you were coming from, let's say, Latin America, and you were known that you had, ideas that agreed with the Germans, your ship was confiscated. That's basically what they were doing. They were just legalizing the theft of anybody that was they thought could work with the Germans or help the German war effort. Which, I mean, for the time frame, I mean that was, if you notice, this doesn't, while it's talked about in the press for the most part, it's kind of, it doesn't relate to anything. You know what I mean?
Another issue with this, the Ministry of Shipping, it's also part of a way of keeping tabs on like what the British have used, because they were still paying everybody for the services that were being rendered. Remember, like Britain was paying like cash, gold bullion cash, fucking like full price for Thompson machine guns during the war. So like, yeah, when I say like, yeah, your ship would get pressed into service, like, yeah, okay, so your crew would now have no option but to do as they were told. However, the company would be reimbursed still. And this is what part of the Ministry of Shipping was like, okay, so we've just seconded this container ship from a Cunard liner right now. We've got to mark out how much we use that so we can compensate later on. So it was a lot of it's more record keeping than anything else. But like there were people that were reimbursed for their service.
Well, no, and I see on the 31st, that's when we're going to get the Rasputin. But you could safely say, though, at this point, on the 22nd, the plot is in motion, right?
Which plot? Oh, the plot to kill
yeah.
him? Oh, yeah.
To kill Rasputin, yeah.
Oh, very much so. But we'll get to that point. All right. The affair of Magda Haba, all right, which is basically more of the operations of the British in the Sinai. The German, Austro-Hungarian, and Turkish governments send a reply to President Wilson. All right, an immediate meeting of delegates is suggested. In other words, they're saying, "Hey, let's stop the war." The Anglo-French conference, all right, meets in London to discuss the United States peace notes, where they basically reject it. Joffre is given a ceremonial position of Marshal of France. Lord Devonport is appointed the food controller in Great Britain. The French battleship Gélios is sunk by submarine in the Mediterranean, and the Gélios is this ship right here. You can see that this is like the pre-modern, right in between the moderns. You can see the big turrets, but then you see some of the small turrets hanging off the side.
Yep.
Yeah, so, actually, that looks fairly modern. I like it, for one. The only way you could really tell the difference is the boilers, right?
No, the positioning of the guns. You got a turret right up front, you got a turret right in the arse, and you got some turrets hanging off the sides. And that's your pre-dreadnought type battleships. You can tell by where the turrets are. Like your pre-dreadnoughts had single barrels and gigantic turrets down the sides of the ship. Then you get into your dreadnought type battleships where they figured, hang on a minute, why don't we just stick them all in turrets and then stick them all down the center line of the ship? And this is pre the 2 forward, 1 rear sort of standard setup we got today. And they found that the turrets in the center of the ships, like between like where the funnels and the bridges and all those kinds of things are, were heavily encumbered by the superstructure of the actual ship itself. And if they put the turrets either all the way at the front or all the way at the rear, then you've got a largely greater arc of fire and all that kind of stuff. So there's the 3 ways you can tell the three levels of battleship. Your pre-dreadnought had them all over the place. The dreadnoughts had them all down the center line, but some in the middle, and then everything after that, your fast battleships had them either at the front and the rear, or all at the front, or
yeah, this is kind of a hybrid between them. This is as things are changing, so it's something in between us. What I do find it, and this is very interesting, is the smokestacks are actually in a better position. This is actually an attempt to modernize how they're doing the smokestacks, actually. But I mean, because you notice they're not way up above everything, right? And yet at the same time, they're pretty clear. They're keeping everything clear, so you're not encumbering any of the guns or any of the visuals. All right. So this was a modern idea behind this. Now, did it work really well? I mean, for what it was, it was an interesting attempt to modernize, but you know, it's still with these type of gun emplacements right here. These gun emplacements are basically useless. They might as well not be there for the reasons that Farty was talking about.
This also shows too.
Farty, were they still trying to do the old broadside style of fighting when really it was more at a longer distance now?
Yeah, in fact, yeah, this is like we keep talking about World War One being turning points and all this kind of stuff for technology and tactics and all this. And yes, well, because before you had ironclads, before you had that, you had the old broadside, buddy, tall ships and stuff like that. So the whole thing of the full broadside, getting every single gun to bear in a close range duel, was still an actual thing at that point. And that's why you do have like casemates with lots of secondary and tertiary weapons, you know, peppered down the sides of these things, because they were intended to get right up close and start thumping each other with, like, even rifle fire was expected at some points. By the end of World War One, they've realised that, okay, your naval battles are starting to get some distance between the two of them, so we don't really need tertiary weapons anymore. These tertiary weapons weren't like, they were sort of like anti-aircraft caliber sized, but they were still sort of hand-load, breech-fed weapons that like, they were just way too slow to take out aircraft and all this. So they will be replaced later on with lighter caliber anti-aircraft weapons, but those weapons will never be intended for anti-ship use or anything like that, like with the pre-World War One type deal. So yeah, this is part of the last sort of, okay, yeah, we're still hanging on to this tertiary weapon system idea.
Okay. The Entente governments reject the German peace proposals. The British and the Chinese governments conclude a peace agreement for the employment of Chinese labor in France. The Bulgarian government replies accepting President Wilson's note. The campaign for the Sudan Darfur forces comes to an end. Basically, they are now moving all the forces that they had trying to subdue the Darfur. They succeeded. And they're now going to be realigned. These are British forces that are going to be realigned now into the push in the Sinai. And then what Mad Dodge has been waiting for this entire time, Rasputin is murdered.
Rasputin.
Yeah, let's get to the creepy guy in a second. Okay. For the United States to hand out an olive branch, and for the German alliance to pretty much go, yeah, we'll talk peace, let's do it right now. And then the Brits and the French are like, fuck off, mate. Doesn't that make them look bad?
Well, it's not just, you got to remember, it's also the French, the German, and the Russians are saying no. They're basically refusing to agree to talk.
I just think that makes them look bad. But anyway, okay. So the build up to Rasputin's death, he has been helping the Tsar's wife with her son. He's the only one that can calm this child down. And this child, what disease does he have? Isn't it the thin blood? He gets a paper cut and he bleeds for hours?
Yes.
Yeah, hemophilia. It's a blood condition that prevents your blood from congealing or clotting over. So basically, every time you get a cut and it bleeds a little and the blood starts to dry, that's called congealing or clotting, and that's your human body's basic self-repair system.
Vitamin K or creatine is not produced and not stored in the body.
So when a hemophiliac does something like bumps themselves on a table or something like that, where like normally in say you and me, it would result in maybe a bruise, maybe it could potentially kill him because he does not have the ability to stop bleeding without coagulants.
The blood doesn't clot, and he's able to help with that.
Which we'll get to. I want to know how he was able to help with that. But first, also at the same time, the Tsar has left. He has not been in the capital for months on end. He is out with the army, the same army that is losing battle after battle. Also, you have these revolutionaries going through the countryside, recruiting the deserters, the peasants, because in Russia, they were still a serfdom. They still had serfs. You've had this undercurrent of rebellion fomenting for quite a while, have you not?
Really, you have, but at the same time, the pressure. For the most part, the revolutionaries were in the cities. All right, at the start of the war, all right, the revolutionaries were in the cities, and for the most part, they're being ignored. All right, they don't have a lot of popular support in the serfs with the serfs and everything else. All right, as the war progresses and as the serfs are suffering, they begin to make inroads, specifically not just in the army, but especially in the Navy. And this is something that people don't recognize. The Navy, the Russian Navy is how do I put this? Their officers are like officers from the 1700s. Okay, they are treating these troops. They're treating the sailors as if they're just basically the old Mutiny on the Bounty kind of style, with that mentality. Now, obviously, this isn't going to work really well. But there's an incident that's getting ready to happen that's going to play a significant role. All right, that we in the West don't recognize. But there's an incident that's going to happen, and we'll talk about it on one of the ships in the next month. All right, that plays a role to this. So the dissatisfaction and the recriminations that have been going on within the Russian military, all right, and within Russia as a whole, have been percolating, and unfortunately, the Tsar he's ignoring the reports because everyone's afraid to tell him bad news. All right,
Yeah.
this is another aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at it, the main problem with Rasputin is they felt he was controlling the Tsar's wife, therefore controlling the Tsar.
It wasn't just that. Rasputin is, or he's supposed to be a holy man, right? He's sleeping with the wives of nobles. It's like he's having his own kind of hedonistic. He's living a hedonistic lifestyle. There are stories that he's basically sleeping and cuckolding the empress, which there's no real proof to that, but these are the stories that are going around in the court. It is well known that he's sleeping with many of the court ladies, all right, and he's having wild orgies and stuff. So the idea that he's like he's running a little internal Peyton place in what's going on, and the Tsarina, of course, will not listen when people are coming back and saying bad things about what the monk is doing. She's like, no, that isn't true. All right, she refuses to accept that this guy is a freaking scumbag.
Yeah, and Jesse Miller in the chat says 4 whores a day gave him superpowers.
Well, I mean,
So why do you think we've got 4 floors of whores down here?
so
Well, and also he didn't bathe, right? Isn't that what they were saying too? Is he was a dirty son of a bitch?
He it was part of his monastic type of environment. He only, I think it was once a month, or not once a month, but once a year, he would bathe. All right, that he said something like that, and so he reeked. To put it mildly, he reeked.
Wait, so he's having orgies and shit and never bathing. He's handing out the clap like it's fucking Pez.
The fucking urinary tract infection, at least.
He is he, and of course, who's he sleeping with? He's sleeping with all the nobles' wives. So
that can't be the only reason. I mean, I get it, jealousy, anger, the fact that he's sleeping with your wife and you're a fucking lord, and the czar's wife won't listen. The czar's nowhere around. You have revolution brewing. You're losing the war. Is that still a reason to kill him? They also said he was not just hedonistic with his sexual practices, but they called him a mystic, right? Wasn't he into the occult and shit?
Well, to an extent. I mean, back then, but to be honest, that was a normal practice back then. Believe it or not, what they considered occult and that stuff was very popular around the world at that point in time. But it's just the way people were, all right? They would glom on to anything that was occult-like, all right, during this time frame. It was quite an interesting time frame. In fact, a lot of the nobility within the British government were also occultists.
They actually used to give a lot of credence to this kind of bullshit too.
Yeah.
Like there was one point where it was after the HMS Hood got sunk. There was this thing where a whole bunch of people wanted to do a seance and talk to the sailors that went missing with that shit, and that was apparently played off as if it actually did happen. Like, you know, they actually did talk to the dead and all this kind of shit.
Now think about this. This is the time frame. If you want to take a look at it and understand it from an American perspective, this is the time frame of Henry Houdini. Right? This is the same type of time frame that's going on, and Houdini, of course, was he was an anti-mystic because he was very upset with how his, what they did with his mother and so forth. They convinced her to try and talk to the dead, and they basically stole all of her money, and he was very upset about that. But Houdini was very popular at this time as well. This is all part of this time frame. I mean, even in American circles, like I said, mysticism was very, very much in vogue.
Yeah, absolutely. But all right, let's get to the night of the murder. He's at a gathering, right? And they try to poison him. What, like 3 separate times?
They give him a lot. They give him poison drink, poison food. he's ingesting it. He's acting kind of loopy, but it isn't killing him. Right?
All right, now this will start freaking you out, right? The cooks put enough poison in these cupcakes to kill a fucking elephant, and here's Rasputin, one shot downing them in one fucking foul swoop, one after the other. Boink, 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 eating them whole, right? And he's just sitting there, nothing's going on, doesn't even fucking cock his leg to fart. Now, how freaked out would you be? This should be the most poisonous substance on the planet, and he's just sitting there, just eating it like it's fucking peanuts.
Well, the theory behind that is the poison would have been fine if they hadn't cooked them into the muffins.
Well, that's true too, and this is what a lot of people need to sort of like the sciences behind a lot of what happened to Rasputin. There's a lot of coincidence that comes into play, but it does bring out a lot of the sciences behind like certain poisons and their chemical reactions into people and stuff like that. Like they could have been like he was pissed off his nana too, so the poison could also could have been nullified by the amount of alcohol in his body, or at least watered down to a certain extent.
Yes.
It's not an exact science, especially not in those days.
Well, no, and like and back then, if you put all the in the muffin, you put the muffin in the oven. The oven is cooks the poison right on out. So the poison actually in the muffin isn't very much, right? So it wasn't affecting him, right? But it did start to affect him to an extent after the drink, if I'm not mistaken. But he's not dying. He's just, how do I say it? It's affecting him mentally.
He's got indigestion pretty much, but like this is sort of, now you can sort of start to see why people were sort of like, this cunt must be mystic. But if you actually look into it, well, that can be explained by that. There's a lot cooked out. What else had he been eating? His metabolism, and all this kind of stuff. And then like the person who actually put the poison in there, they could have fucked up their dosages. Didn't carry the one or something like that, and
possible.
They might have put in enough they thought could have killed an elephant that might have been able to kill an elephant ant.
Okay, well, let's say, the muffin's fine. We'll explain that. Cooked out. I'm cool with that. Second way they tried to poison him, his wine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We'll explain the wine.
Okay, like I did mention, depending on what kind of poison they used, the alcohol in the wine could have had a nullifying effect, or it could have had a watering down effect. Not entirely sure, but there's a couple of explanations. So all of this stuff does build up to finally give him a lethal dose, but like their attempts to try and give him that lethal dose are very much sort of inhibited by the processes that they used.
Well, I mean, he may have had a lethal dose, but it isn't instantaneous. And they're expecting an instantaneous kill. That's the big problem. He's probably going to die from the poison. All right, they're just not willing to wait.
Yeah. Well, see, that's where also you say with the whole not an exact science. I mean, the big misnomer is that like you chew down on a cyanide pill and within seconds that's it, you're dead, and you just simply just drop dead. No, it takes several seconds. Can take anywhere above 10 seconds. You chew on it and you're sitting there starting to fucking choke and froth and all this kind of stuff. You literally start drowning on the froth inside your lungs. So people just seem, oh yeah, give him cyanide. Oh, hang on, this is 10 seconds later and he's still fidgeting and carrying on. Oh, Jesus, did we give him enough?
I don't think they ever use cyanide, though.
No.
Rasputin, they never use cyanide.
No, but I'm saying that's the big misnomer with poisons. Like, people think, you take cyanide and then you're out like a light. No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And I think one of the poison they were trying to kill him with was strychnine. And strychnine, whether you like it or not, it's not as deadly a poison. I mean, it's not an instantaneous death poison.
No, it makes you really, really, really sick before you do get to a lethal dose. Yeah, I've got some downstairs.
So they get tired of waiting.
Well, no, I just want to read the chat. Jesse Miller says, maybe he was evil. I've heard that. Some people think he was possessed. All sorts of weird stuff. You said they poisoned him in 3 separate ways. What's the third way?
The third way was that they tried to poison his smoke, just like the cigars that they was smoking. That they gave him to smoke. But I'm not sure he actually smoked. All right, at that time. I mean, not saying he wasn't a smoker. I'm just saying that there's a theory that he never actually decided to light up that day.
Well, and okay, here's Rasputin drinking wine, and they're just handing him wine, right? Oh, eat another, drink here, have another glass. He's not thinking anything's weird. Don't these fucking assholes hate me? I would be thinking.
Actually, he had a premonition. There's a lot of people who believe that he had premonitions that he knew he was going to die, and he was just accepting the fact that he's going to die that day.
Then there was also just the other point of view that like he'd been in this hedonistic world where all these lords and nobles had just been throwing him all this shit for free. Well, one night he shows up and they're throwing him a big banquet and all this kind of stuff, telling him to eat up. Like, okay, this is just normal.
Yeah, that's a good point too, Farty. That is a good point. So from his perspective, no, this is normal.
Okay, he doesn't die. They then do they shoot him
Yep.
right then
Yes.
and there, or do they take him
They
to
go
the
in
bridge?
and shoot him 3 times.
There's two. They shot him twice, and then he went to leave, and the third shot was the glancing blow on his head.
Didn't he crawl his way to the bridge and then they threw him
No,
over? Because he
they
ends up.
carried him to the bridge and threw him in. that's a they carried him and tossed him in the river.
Yeah.
So
And
here
then-
it is. Is this St. Petersburg or Moscow?
I think it's St. Petersburg.
Yeah, I do believe it's St. Petersburg.
Okay, so it's fucking this December 31st. It's like freezing in St. Petersburg. And they throw him in the freezing ass river. And the fucker swims around in circles for 20 minutes?
Well, now we don't know how true any of that is. Okay, there's no way of knowing because the body doesn't show up for several days.
And autopsies aren't that accurate at the time. Now with the bullets and the shootings and stuff like that, now like did get shot in the head, and from everything I can find, it was a glancing blow, and like people survived that, not a problem. Thousands of people have survived that. But the other 2 shots, I'm pretty sure they tried to shoot him either in the stomach or in the chest or something like that. And
One with the chest wound missed the, if I'm not mistaken, it missed the heart, but it got the lung.
And well, either way, the 2 body shots have generally been explained away because of, well, it's Russia, it's in the middle of winter, and the clothing technology at the time was just layer. If you wanted more warmth, you just layer it even further. And a lot of people have attributed the similar situation to what people were finding in the Korean War, which was that the Koreans were wearing so much clothing that the adage goes that the 30 carbine round didn't have enough oomph to finally get through all of the clothing and cause a fatal injury. So the bullets that they were using at the time were renowned for being fairly anemic. It was new smokeless technology, and they hadn't worked out all their ballistics and all this kind of stuff at those times. If it went bang and it hit somebody, that was good enough back in those days. Had they'd known all about ballistics and all this kind of stuff, they probably would have determined that, yes, most of his clothing stopped most of the energy of the round and only caused him some mild wounds. But even then, too, you could get shot with some pistol rounds from those days and just walk it off almost in some cases.
Right. The amount of hydrostatic shock was minimal, but I still think the bullet wounds killed him. I still think he was going to die of the bullet wounds no matter what. Throwing him in the river was just a way to get rid of him, to ensure it.
In the aftermath, what did the Tsar's wife do about it? Tsarina, is that what you called her? I don't know. I
Yeah,
just said
Tsarina.
Tsar's wife.
She went berserk. All right, and she basically went after anyone she thought was a part of this in the court, all right, to get rid of them. And when I mean to get rid of them, I mean get rid of them the old-fashioned way, you whacking them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. She really did lose her shit.
Okay, so yeah, so that if there was someone that they thought there was, and they have a trial, if I'm not mistaken, on this guy. So, but yeah, she goes nuts. She basically distrusts everybody in the court. She loses all support of the court because she basically blames them all as a nest of vipers.
All right. Well, headed into 1917. Nothing happens the first 2 days of the year. That's interesting.
All right. Romania, Foscani in Romania is taken by German forces. First units of the Portuguese Expeditionary Force land in France. Yes, the Portuguese are there to save the French. Action in Bejo Bejo. All right, more stuff in Africa, which are just smaller things. And now, I guess, Haig is now promoted to field marshal. I guess he replaces French, right?
Yes.
And then you have on January 4th, the Russian battleship Privyazet, all right, is sunk off the port. This is the battleship here. As you can see, this is a huge ship. All right. It is also pre-dreadnought, but it is massive. Okay. Now, go ahead.
And she's also got a ramming bow.
All right. This ship, however, sinks in port. Okay. So there's a lot of recriminations as to what happened here. There is a big propaganda movie by the communists in Russia. I can't remember the name of it. I wish I could remember the name of it. For some reason, it's escaping me. I've been trying to think of this all freaking day. That talks about this, because this becomes a focal point in the port in Crimea. All right, for the rise of the communists. Right, where the Russian Navy, see, the Russian Navy revolts before the Russian army does, and it's actions such as the ship that bring this about.
It was I did like the look of the ships back then. They all look
really.
good.
You like that look of that? That thing is ugly.
No, I like
That's
that.
a hideous ship, dude.
No, ram it right into people like it's a fucking iceberg. Thing's awesome.
No.
I mean, this ship is in the Mediterranean. Well, the Black Sea. That's where the ship is. All right. Barilla. Oh, I'm sorry. This was a different ship. I'm sorry. This ship was sunk off Port Said. This is off the coast of Egypt. Actually, my mistake. All right. There's another ship that I'm going to get to. Maybe it's not today. The last Russian and Romanian forces evacuate Dobra. All right. The Inter-Allied Chartering Committee establishing the charter for shipping. Mr. Teparov resigns. All right. Prince Golstian, and is succeeded by Prince Golstian. The Battle of Kut, the Second Battle of Kut begins. Action in the Sinai. The last Turkish troops in the Sinai recross the frontier. It's the last time that they're in the Sinai. The HMS Cornwallis is sunk by a ship on the Mediterranean. Now, this, if I'm not mistaken, the Cornwallis was a full modern ship, wasn't it?
Oh, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
The Entente governments send a joint reply to Wilson's notes. All right, Allied war aims are outlined. The Belgian government send a reply to Wilson's notes, right, which is basically go pound sand. Sounds, in a diplomatic speech, it was, well, it sounds good, but they really have to return to the non-belligerent states. And they wanted the big thing was that they wanted assurances for Serbia. And the one thing that the Austro-Hungarians were not going to do is they were not going to sit up there and give Serbia back after they'd spent all that blood and treasure conquering Serbia. So the Austro-Hungarians were not going to agree to it. The Germans, they wanted to keep their gains for the most part. And they wanted a buffer zone against the French forces. And I think part of that was they still weren't going to respect Belgian neutrality, right? If I'm not mistaken. And so basically, they're both sides are already at an impasse. Settlement treaty between between Turkey and Germany. The Austro-Hungarian and German governments issue a note repudiating responsibility for the continuance of the war, declaring that they will prosecute the war to the successful end. The Japanese battle cruiser Tsubaki is sunk by an internal explosion, and I believe that's this one right here. This is once again another pre-war battleship or pre-dreadnought battleship. It's got the turrets at the top and it's got a turret in the back, but it's still got the side turrets. However, I included this because one thing, this was just sunk in port. It was an internal explosion, all right, from poor powder, magazine distribution. And this was something that was a problem for all the ships back then. Nobody was very good at powder discipline. No one, not the Germans, not the British. The Germans were better at it than the British were, but not the British. It was just an aspect. You also got to remember the battleship, the Maine, while it precedes this by a couple of decades, it got blown up by an internal magazine explosion as well.
You also got to remember too that this being new technology and all this kind of stuff, it just so happens we are all at war while these battleships are randomly blowing up in harbour and stuff like that. And then people don't really put the connection onto, handling processes and things like that being a problem. They're just instantly going, well, we're at war. Our battleship blew up in the harbour. Must be a spy.
Well, the spy or the enemy did it somehow. Now we just got to figure out how to get it.
So, but it wasn't until after the war where they've realised, well, hang on a minute, we might have messed this up a few times. And then handling practices, new designs of ships and stuff like that start proliferating through after that.
Italy accedes to the Franco-British Convention as to naval prizes. General Shukolev of the Russian Ministry of War resigns and is succeeded by Belesiev. The Inter-Allied Conference, Russia, France, Great Britain, and Italy assembles in Petrograd to discuss war policy and finances. The German government sends instructions to the German war minister in Mexico to negotiate an alliance between Mexico and Japan against the United States. Now,
we got to talk about that because there are doubts that actually ever happened.
I think it happened.
Yeah, you kind of want to know how you guys found out about it. We kind of told you.
Yeah.
It's like while we're trying to get you guys, while we're trying to get you guys on our side, it's like, hey, by the way, the Germans and the Mexicans and the Japs are doing this, and we're not. So you want to side with us?
Yeah, see, that's why there's some doubt on it. The very people who had every reason to tell us that found out. They just so happened to crack the code. Yeah. Convenient.
All right. One thing that is very true is the German diplomatic communiques were basically wide open to the British. The Germans, for whatever reason, I've never understood this. Okay, all right. During World War I and in World War II, all right. With World War I, you can go, okay, they cracked it, they understood it, and then they were following this, and they were very successful at it. Right, and there's a lot of truth to just how effective the British monitoring of the communications from the Germans was, and it was like they were reading it on their completely. You would think, however, that come World War II, the Germans would be a little bit more suspicious about how they went about this. So they created the Enigma, but then they came back with the same attitude, which is, well, we're so much superior to the British, they would never sit up there and be able to read our codes. You would think that they would have learned to go, maybe we need to be watching this a little more closely. But their mentality prevents them from realizing just how wide open they are.
And it's another aspect too, like where America had a battle plan to take over the UK. It had one to take over Canada and all this kind of stuff. It is getting to a point where the Germans are actually sort of starting to think the same way as what the Commonwealth was like, okay, where are the Americans going on this? Are they going to side with us or are they going to side with the Allies? And this is also sort of a prelude to, well, if the Americans do join the Allies, we're going to be at war with the Americans, so we might need to think about, getting terrain closer by so we can hit them.
Why didn't anybody take the stance, leave the Americans alone and they'll leave us alone? We were perfectly prepared to do so until this fucking note comes out. And then we're like, oh, it's fuck us, huh, Germany?
Well, this has kind of been going backwards and forwards for a couple of years already. I mean, the French and the British have been saying, join us, help us with this European war. But you've also been selling stuff to the Germans and Austrians and stuff at the same time. So no one knows which way you're going to go. No one even knows if you're going to join. And if you are, we'd rather you do it on our side.
Yep. All right. So the General Hoskins succeeds the General Schmutz in command of the British forces in East Africa. The Harwich flotilla action with the German 6th torpedo boat flotilla in the action sinks the HMS Simone. Now, this is kind of an interesting action because it basically is a North Sea action where the Germans, one of the few times the small little torpedo boats are very, actually succeed in doing something. They basically sent out just a bunch of torpedo boats to harass a major British ship, and they sank it. I believe the Simone is a cruiser, isn't it? I don't think it was a battleship. I think it was a cruiser. But it's effective. It shows that the mass swarming from these smaller torpedo boats can be effective.
And it's quite interesting now that we're now going back to a swarm fire mentality with smaller munitions and like small diameter bombs, anti-ship missiles, and there's a few other things. But basically, we throw enough at something that they can't shoot all of them down. Something's going to get through eventually.
Yeah, and it can be an effective technique, but it's always the range of such a tactic is limited. You're not going to project firepower from doing that. But in the North Sea, where you're basically next to one another, I mean, it would have been an effective tactic. It would have been interesting to have combined this type of tactic with with the rest of the battleships during the Battle of Jutland. That could have made a difference.
Well, when you say a cruiser, are you talking something that's kind of like the modern Corvette? It's a mid-sized, pretty much a mini battleship.
One step below the battle cruiser. It's one step below the battleship. Think of it as the next ship below a battleship. These are heavily armed, fairly big gun ships. They have the biggest guns. They've got the second biggest guns.
Yeah, your cruisers are around between your 10 and 13 inch range, and then anything above 13 inches basically is a battleship. But your cruisers were designed to have some pretty decent sized guns on them, but not very much armor and a lot of speed. So they can move fast, they can hit fairly hard, and they can get out of the road real quick. They just can't take a hit at all.
Okay, because the Corvette's kind of like that, but it's a little bit smaller, I think.
They can take hits from anything except for a battleship. I wouldn't say that they're not. They're armored to the point for what they were created for. They are the main, but they are the main fly. They aren't the prestige flag, but they're the ones that are doing the dirty work. All right, when it comes to a blockade work. In a lot of ways, they're the ones who are running out there, seeing what's out there. All right, they're always the presence, and they're basically doing all of the grunt work. They're the ones running down the commerce raiders and so forth. They're the ones that are sent to take out the commerce raiders. Why? Because the battleship is overkill,
and it's too slow most of the time.
So it's not that they have an interesting role for World War I and World War II. After World War II, their role basically is supplanted because of the firepower of missiles and so forth. Make it that a destroyer can do what the cruisers can do, but that has yet to happen. Okay. Waj is captured by the Arab forces. In other words, the British Arab campaign has begun and is succeeding. The Greek government makes a formal apology to the Allies for the occurrences of the 1st of December. Basically, if I'm not mistaken, what happens in the, what do you call it? The Venezuelanists. I can't remember. All right.
Yeah.
The Allied Naval Conference is held in London as a policy in the Mediterranean. Southwand and Wangford in the Suffolk coast is shelled by German destroyers. The Germans are basically trying to provoke the Grand Fleet to come out to try and do another Jutland. Another foreign minister for Russia resigns. Basically, the Russian government is starting to come apart at the seams. And then you have the last day. The German government's announced the forthcoming unrestricted submarine warfare and threatened to sink hospital ships.
Okay, now.
Yeah. Okay, that's the stupidest move Germany ever made in World War One. I said it.
And that pretty much shoots themselves in the foot, because remember, in the last couple of months, we've had 2 hospital ships sink in the Mediterranean quite controversially, and now Germans turn around and say, nah, fuck it, even hospital ships are fair game. And this does turn around to the Americans and say, well, hang on, all of that nun-stomping fucking stormtrooper shit, that's kind of starting to sound true. These Germans are cunts.
Yeah, this is a bad idea that will bring America into the war, and very quickly from this point. And where this has an effect, an immediate effect, is the fact that Great Britain is then protected by American shipping.
Mm-hmm.
When you push America into the war at the beginning of the war, the American army flat out doesn't exist. Okay, the American army has to ramp up. All right,
mm-hmm.
the United States Army has not been building. There has been no movement to increase the size of the army. All America has, though, is America has a Navy, and now with the addition of the American Navy to the upcoming effort, the supplies going to Britain now are secure.
Yep.
For all intents and purposes. Yes, some submarines can get in now and then, but for all intents and purposes now, it's with the secure shipping, Britain now is going to ramp up very quickly.
Because what this also does is that it relieves the Royal Navy from having to provide elements for convoys. It frees those elements up to go out and do more offensive actions.
Right. Now, it's in some ways it's too little too late, because if this had happened a year earlier, the United States would have been shipping would have been doing a lot of shipping over to Russia. Okay, and a lot of the pressure on Russia to ramp up what could have been alleviated, because the Americans would have been shipping through the Pacific, where there really wasn't a threat by anybody. Now, how the Japanese would have reacted to that would have been interesting. The Japanese may have reacted to it negatively. We don't know. I mean, that's kind of speculation. There's people that speculate on that. But overall, if the Japanese allowed the Americans to start shipping arms and shipping weapons and things over to the Russians, it could have changed the dynamic if it had happened a year earlier. But as it is, the Russians are coming apart at the seams.
Yeah, and what are you doing next Sunday, MC? I know it's right after Christmas, so you might be out of town or something.
No, I'll be here.
All right. Well, yeah, I think we might end up with the U.S. in the war either next week or the week after for sure. So, finally, something I might know something about.
we go into war, if I'm not mistaken. We go in April.
But thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you for hanging out, Jesse. And yeah, push America. We will push your shit in.
That sounded pretty gay, actually.
Yeah, it did sound a little bit. But no, The Navy, yes. What about the American Air Force or the Army Air Corps, as it was?
There is
at
no
that
Army
point?
Air Corps. There's no Army.
Okay, so we have to
So-
ramp that up too, right?
Yeah. Things like your Air Corps, your tank your tank elements core. Those things don't exist yet.
No, we don't. we are not prepared for battle in any way, shape, or form. We start shipping. We start build as we start to build up, and you'll see this. All right, as we start to build up, we are training with wooden with wood. Okay, we're not even training them with actual equipment. We're training with wood. We're saying, here's a rifle. Here's your stick. It's a rifle.
So here's a fairly apt joke for you, because this does come from reality. There is film footage that backs this up, where they're playing with wooden guns and stuff like that, literally yelling out bang. There's this group of riflemen, and their section commander said, right, you guys sit on this ridge line and cover this, and anything that comes along this field, fucking shoot it. So all of a sudden, there comes these four blokes standing in a little square, and they're just walking across this field, and all these riflemen up on the top of this hill, they're going bang, 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 we got you, you're dead, bang, 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 and they still kept coming. And then it wasn't until like 10 minutes later they got right up close, and they're still shooting and going bang, bang, we got you, and then they shut up for a second and heard the other guys just going tankety tank, tankety tank, tankety tank, tankety tank.
Oh, god damn it.
But like, no, that shit was true, and it's even funnier too when you think of only a few years prior to that, Hiram Maxim tried to sell the Maxim or the Vickers machine gun to the Americans, and you guys said no, we don't want it.
Yeah, we don't need
Yeah, not our smartest moment. But on that note, we're going to take off. Merry Christmas, everyone. If I don't do a stream before then, I probably will. Actually, I will for sure. Tuesday is Rose City by Night. Come out and see that. It's getting interesting. Bunch of plague rats. I shot MC in the head last game. It's getting great. So come out and check it out.
I'm just going to lay there and, I'm going to use this.
All right. Good night. Good luck. And Merry Christmas.